It seemed like he was only happy when he was drunk. When he was sober, he was not himself. Then, when I got home with him, we had a dog at the time, and he took the trash bag and spread the trash in the living room. I picked it up and said, "Ours. I'll clean it up." I wasn't going to argue. He went to the kitchen, but I don't remember what he went to do, if he went to eat something. I had a really hard time understanding that he seemed to only be happy when he was drunk. When he was sober, he was not normal. I remember getting home with him, and we had a dog at the time. Our dog took the trash bag and spread the trash in the living room. I got it. I said, "Ours. I'll clean it up." I didn't want to argue. He went to the kitchen, and I don't remember what he went to do. I don't remember if he went to eat something. I went to the living room, and my friend went to the room right next to it. I cleaned the floor. I heard a sound, and then a very strong impact. He punched me in the back. It was the first and only time that he hit me. He punched me in the back, and I was scared that I was holding the broom and sweeping the floor. I looked at him and asked why he did this, and he swore that he didn't. I went to the living room, and my friend went to the room right next to it. I was cleaning the floor when I heard a loud noise, and then I felt something hit me. It was the first and only time he hit me. He hit me in the back, and I was scared, because I was holding the broom and sweeping the floor. I looked at him and asked why he did that, and he swore he didn't. He wanted me to believe he didn't hit me, because he was crazy. I'm Sinara. I'm currently 39 years old, and I had one abusive relationship that almost killed me for 15 years. I knew this person through the family of that person. I took a private class with the aunt of the boy's friend. At the time, I was 18 and he lived in Belo Horizonte, and I lived in Januaria, which is in the north of Minas. I had no interest in dating or marrying at the time. We exchanged letters, which was how we communicated since we didn't have the technology we have today. It took 3 seconds for a letter to reach the other. I liked rock bands, and I was always involved in this environment. He played guitar in a band, and people practically only talked about bands. He was 23, and he lived in Belo Horizonte, while I lived in Januaria, which is in the north of Minas. At the time, I wasn't interested in dating or getting married. We exchanged letters, since we didn't have the technology we have today. It took 3 seconds for a letter to reach the other person. I was always involved in this environment, and he played guitar in a band. People practically only talked about bands. Then, at the start of the new year, I went to visit my parents in town. I no longer lived with my parents. I lived in another city to make my parents send me to Claros Montes to make PRE Everebula. Then, I ended up coming back to Januaria to spend the holidays, and he traveled to my city to visit me. We started staying in touch and getting to know each other, and then we stayed together for 7 months, while we dated long distance until it was a new year, and I went to visit my parents in town. I no longer lived with them. I lived in another city to make my parents send me to Claros Montes to make PRE Everebula. Then, I ended up coming back to Januaria to spend the holidays. He traveled to my city to visit me, and we started spending time together. We dated for 7 months, and then I moved to Belo Horizonte. I was accepted into the entrance exam, and I passed it. I fell madly in love with him, because he treated me very well. Everything was great until things started to change. I was trying to enter college, while I was in pre-university at 17. I had already completed the 2nd degree, as my family always believed in the importance of studying. I had the good fortune of being accepted into college in Belo Horizonte, and I was ecstatic. I had always been encouraged by my family to prioritize my studies, So this was a really special moment for me. I had just finished high school, and I was on the hunt for a place to live. At that time, I was 17 years old, and his mother really wanted me to stay with them. I ended up living with his parents for 30 days, but I really wanted to live my own life. We weren't married yet, and then I realized I already had I was working and going to college in Belo Horizonte at the time, and I was looking for a place to rent. His mother really wanted me to stay with them, so I did. He lived with his parents, and I went there for 30 days. I didn't want to live there longer, because I wanted to have my own life. We weren't married yet, and I realized I had a problem with his mother. They had a strange relationship. It looked like she was his wife, and he was her husband. I felt very uncomfortable, and she was cruel to me. I remember that there was a time when I worked. I worked from 8:40 to 9:40 p.m., Monday to Saturday. I was just me, and I had just turned 1. I had a bit of a rough time with her, and it was all so confusing. I think she was like a wife to him, and he was her husband. I felt really awkward around her, and I remember her being kind of mean to me. There was this one time when I was working late, like 9:40 p.m. to 10:40 p.m., from Monday to Saturday. I was just a kid, only 9 years old. I had just moved into a new place, and she wasn't there anymore. She looked a lot different. Thank you so much. As soon as I get a break from work, I'll change here, and your son will stay here with you. Then, she asked me to go to her brother's house that night for dinner. I don't remember what happened after that, but I went, and she gave me everything. I had already found a place to stay, and she was on her way out. She looked a lot better. Thank you so much. As soon as I get a break from work, I'll change here, and your son will stay here with you. Then, she asked me to go to her brother's house, where they were having dinner. I don't remember what happened, but I went, and she gave me everything. I ended up in a very dangerous area late at night, without anyone, and without knowing anyone. Then, I think her husband, my father-in-law, realized she was there with bad intentions, and he said, "I'm going after her." That's why he found me. The bus driver felt sorry for me, and it was already the last stop of the night. It was in a very poor neighborhood, and it looked like a slum. It was a very strange place. So ugly, no. I was almost without a car, and the bus dropped me off in a neighborhood on a hill. I was scared, but they found me and took me to her. She called me names and said that I was Chico Bento, because I came from the interior, and didn't know anything about the city. They were always better than me, and I thought it was strange, because I come from a normal family with access to things. I was in a tight spot, and didn't have a car. One day, I was at a friend's house, and they found me and took me to their place. I was a little scared, and they teased me a bit. They called me names like Chico Bento, because I was from the interior, and didn't know how to build things or do anything like that. They were always the best, and I thought it was strange, because I came from a normal family with access to things. I didn't understand why she did that. Then, I moved to my house, which was very good, because it was also close to my work. One day, I was working on a Saturday, and he said he wanted to find me at the end of the day. I said, "That's okay." I was waiting for him at the door, and he arrived all dirty from the mud and very drunk. I realized that there was something I had to do. I was confused as to why she did that, but I'm glad it did. It was really nice, because it was close to my work, and it was a good day. One Saturday, I was working and he came to my house. I said, "No problem. I'll wait for you at the door." He arrived dirty from the mud and very drunk. I realized that there was something I had to talk to him about. He said, "I had a few beers every now and then. It wasn't something that always happened, but he said he couldn't go back to his parents' house, because they didn't know he drank that much. Usually, he slept at someone's house. If he could, he'd sleep at my house. So, he ended up sleeping at my house and spending time there. I realized that he drank a lot, but as I said, I worked at. He said he had a few beers every now and then, but it wasn't a regular thing. He said he couldn't go back to his parents' house, because they didn't know he drank that much. Usually, he slept at someone's house. I said, okay, well, he ended up sleeping at my house, and we spent time together. I realized that he drank a lot, but as I said, I worked a lot to support myself. He had the house of his parents, and I had my own home. I was a student at the time, and I was struggling to enter college that I ended up being accepted into and study law by a year and a half. I studied from 7:30 to 11:30, and then I left my old job and did an internship in the area. I don't remember what I did after that. He was a huge support system for me. He had the house of his parents, and I had my own place. I was a college student at the time, and I had a hard time getting into a college. But I ended up being accepted and studying law for a year and a half. I studied from 7:30 to 11:30, and then I left my old job to do an internship somewhere. I don't remember the name of the place, but I think it was from noon to 6 o'clock. I worked for myself in the Department of Accountability of the Secretariat of State. I was very dedicated, and I was always very hardworking. Studying to read is a family thing. My mother always reinforced this for us at home, so I grew up in a house full of books. Years from there, I transferred to the Faculty of Law at São José. I only did the internship during this period. I'm pretty sure it was from noon to 6. I worked for myself in the Department of Accountability at the Secretariat of State, because I was very dedicated. I was always very hardworking and eager to learn. This is a family thing. My mother always reinforced this for us at home, so I grew up in a house full of books. Years later, I transferred to the Faculty of Law at São José dos Campos. While I was there, I did an internship. In Belo Horizonte, I started working with art, photography, and other things. Then, I did an internship in the area. I went to college and started working with photography, which started to attract me more. He got a job in the interior of São Paulo, so I went to live with him. I chose everything. We were already engaged, and I wanted to be with him. I told him that I wouldn't live right if we weren't married, because I wanted to be with him. I started working with art in Belo Horizonte, including photography and other things. Then, I did an internship in the area. I went to college and started working with photography, which I found increasingly fulfilling. He got a job in São Paulo, and I went to live with him. I chose to stay with him, even though I knew I couldn't give my all to our relationship if I wasn't going to marry him. I told him that I wouldn't give my life to stay his Mercedes. When I moved to São José dos Campos, he said, "Sinara, why don't you invest 100% in your photography studies in the area? It's something that makes you happier." I stopped studying law at that time. I was accepted in another college to study advertising, and I graduated from AT. I started working after graduating. I was so excited to move to São José dos Campos in the interior of São Paulo, but I was a bit worried about leaving my job and starting a new one in a different city. I told him, "Why don't you invest 100% in your photography studies in the area? It's something that would make you happier than studying law." At that time, I stopped studying law and was accepted into another college to study advertising. I graduated from the university and started working. I started studying in art schools at the same time and was very involved in the art world. We began building our life together, and that was when everything started to change. It was worse, because he started drinking a lot, and I couldn't control the situation. It began to have a very bad impact on me. I started to change a lot. I had to have my hair the color that. He would send me to the store to buy new clothes if I didn't like the ones I had. He also had a habit of doing things that I didn't understand, like changing my clothes. This made me feel very bad. We lived in a very large apartment when we got home. I would take off my shoes and leave them there, not wearing them inside. It was a habit of mine. He sent it if I changed my hair. He had a problem with my clothes, and he did some things that I still don't understand. It made me feel really bad. We arrived home, and we lived in a very large apartment. I arrived and immediately took off my shoes, leaving them in the entryway. I didn't wear shoes at home, or just half of them. It was my cleaning issue, and then he hid my shoes. He hid my clothes, too. I asked him to take them back, and he agreed. I believed that the house in Ramallah was haunted by bad things, and that there were people there. I even took people to pray in the house, because I was afraid to sleep. I started to be afraid of what was real and what wasn't. I started to gain a lot of weight, because I was very anxious. My mother traveled a lot. I had a really hard time cleaning my house. He was so scary. He even hid my shoes. I hid my clothes, and then I asked him to leave. I thought the house was haunted. I thought there were bad things in it, and I thought there were people. I even took people to pray in the house, because I was afraid to sleep. I started to be afraid of everything. I gained a lot of weight, because I was so anxious. My mother traveled to São José dos Campos to stay with me. I told my mother, I'll put the shoe at the entrance of the house. One day, it will disappear. He went out to work. I studied in another city. I went to college in another city. Then he returned from service, and I went to college. We were just starting to live our lives like any young couple. Then, whenever I got home, he was very drunk. I was so happy to have him stay with me in São José dos Campos. I put the shoe at the entrance of the house, and I thought, I'll get the shoe back. But it didn't come back. He went out to work. At that time, I was studying in another city. I went to college in another city, and then he arrived from service. I went to college, and we were in that rush of building a life together like any young couple. But whenever I got home, he was very drunk, or he was like that with the face inside the vase. I had to help him with his fear of entering our home full of people. Sometimes, I arrived at college at 11:30 p.m. to find drunk people in my house. It was a terror. I had no life, no privacy. At that time, I was not yet the target, like this, right? He hid my clothes and the shoe, and made me believe that there were bad things and bad spirits in the house. He made me discredit. It was a bit of a rough time. I had a friend over, and he was a bit under the influence. He was naked, and I didn't know how to handle it. I was worried he would enter our home, and I was scared of what might happen. I had a lot of people over, and it was a bit chaotic. I was worried about my privacy and safety. I didn't know what to do, so I hid my clothes and shoes. I made him believe that there were bad things and bad spirits in the house, but I knew it wasn't real. It was a scary time, and it got to a point where I couldn't take it anymore. I remember being there for him, even though it wasn't easy. He was so out of it, and it was scary. Then, one day, he came over with a friend. She lived in a nearby city, and we had a room for guests. I said, sleep here, because tomorrow we're going to college. So, we went shopping, and he was really strange. He was acting weird, and I didn't know how to handle it. It seemed like he was only happy when he was drunk and naked. He was not normal, and then I got home with him. We had a dog at the time, and our dog took the garbage bag and spread trash in the room. I took the trash and said, "Our dog will clean it up." We didn't talk anymore. He went to the kitchen. I don't know. I was confused by his behavior, and I didn't know how to respond. It seemed like he was only happy when he was drunk, and he wasn't himself when he was naked. Then, when I got home with him, we had a dog at the time, and our dog took the garbage bag and spread trash in the room. I took the trash and said, "No more talking." He went to the kitchen, and I don't remember what he went to do. Maybe he went to eat something, and I went to the room, and my friend went to the room right next to mine. I was cleaning the floor when I heard a sound, and then I felt a very strong impact. He came and gave me a punch in the back. It was the first and only time he hit me. He punched me in the back, and I was scared. I was holding the broom, sweeping the floor. I looked for him and asked, "Why did you do this?" I don't remember what he was going to do, but I do remember the moment he went to eat something and I went to the room while my friend went to the other room. I was cleaning the floor when I heard a sound and felt a very strong impact. He came at me and punched me in the back. It was the first and only time he hit me. He punched me in the back, and I was scared. I was holding the broom and sweeping the floor. I looked for him and asked why he did this. He swore he didn't do it. He wanted me to believe he didn't hit me because I was. Then I started to cry. I say this here, and I feel the tears. You know that hot tear falling. And I entered my friend's room, and he was already crying. I will never forget it. I looked at her and told her, "For love's sake, God tells me." He insisted that it didn't happen, that he didn't hit me. I felt like I was losing my mind, and then I started crying. I said, "I feel like I'm seeing this in my head, because I'm so scared." And then I felt the tears start to fall. I remember telling my friend, "I'm in your room, and I can see you're crying." I'll never forget how I looked at her and said, "God, tell me that he didn't hit me." She looked at me, crying, and said, "He punched you because he saw his hand hitting your back. I heard the noise of him hitting you." I told her I was going to call the police, but he wouldn't let me. He said I shouldn't do that. He said it was a lie, so I took off my shirt. He looked at me, crying, and said, "You punched me, not because I saw your hand on his back, but because I heard him hit you." I told him I was going to call the police, but he said not to. He said he was going to change, but he just kept on hurting people. I thought, oh no, this is going to be my family's fault. I was ashamed to tell my father that I had been hit. I couldn't tell my dad that I had finished my wedding because my husband hit me. How could I tell my mother? How could I look at my sisters and say that? I stayed. I tried to change things, but it didn't work out. I thought I could improve the situation, but it didn't get better. I asked God to pray, and he stopped coming to church drunk. But then he started showing up late to work, and he got fired. My family helped him move to another city to get another job, but it didn't work out. I felt so helpless, and it was heartbreaking. I tried to make things better, but it didn't work. Then, he started drinking a lot again. He was always late for work, and he got fired from a job in a different city. I don't know why, but he started saying mean things about my body. He'd say things like, "Your body is ugly," and make fun of how I looked. I tried to lose weight, and I did, but he wasn't happy. Then, his mother started embarrassing me, saying mean things and acting in a way that was really hurtful. We had a great time, but then the drinks came again. He was a teacher at a college, but he got fired. I don't know why, but he started acting weird. He'd say things like, your body is ugly, and make comments about how my body wasn't good enough, and that I had to lose weight. I did lose weight, but he wasn't happy. Then, his mother started embarrassing me with her words and behavior. It hurt me a lot. I told him I didn't want to go back to his parents' house, but he said, "You go, or you will be alone." I said, "I won't stop visiting my parents," and he said, "I won't go alone. You have to be with me." It was his family that embarrassed me. His father, his younger sister, and some uncles. It really hurt my feelings. I told him that I didn't want to go back to his parents' house, but he insisted that I go. He said that if I didn't, I would be alone because I wouldn't stop visiting my parents. I said that I would go alone, and he said that he wouldn't go because I was his wife. He said that I had to be with him, etc. I was humiliated by his family. His father, his younger sister, and some uncles were very quiet and respectful, but his mother did absurd things to me too. I remember catching my clothes and hiding them. I remember having a hat once when I was in her house, and she arrived and spoke. Someone came in and took my things. She left after you bought another one. She took my things when I went to her house. I had to take my suitcase with a lock, and to this day, I don't know what happened to it. I think she wanted to make me doubt my sanity, to make me think I was crazy. I don't know what they wanted with this, but I know it arrived in time. The situation became very critical, and I said, "Look, I won't go there anymore because she treats me very badly. She doesn't respect me as your wife." And right away, from the start, I felt incredible. I think she was looking for something, and if it was to make me doubt my sanity, then to make me think I was crazy. I'm not sure what they wanted, but it arrived in time. The situation became very serious, and I said, "Look, I won't go there anymore because she treats me very badly. She doesn't respect me as your wife, and it's incredible." I started to leave right away because people arrived for me, and I said, one day you have a child. This child will be so beautiful, but it won't count for your mother-in-law." I said, "Not because she doesn't want you to get pregnant. You can get pregnant, because otherwise she will do something people said to." I know, and I was afraid. I was afraid of hers for me to be here today. After all these years saying this, I needed a lot of courage, and I remember saying to him, "One day, you'll have a child, and it'll be so beautiful, but it won't count for your mother-in-law." I said that not because she didn't want you to get pregnant, you know. You can get pregnant. Otherwise, she'd do something, and I knew that. I was afraid. I was afraid for me to be here today, after all this time, saying this. I needed a lot of courage and a lot of power therapy. Arriving in this interview today, I knew things started to get better. We went to live together, and then we did the statement of stable union. Then, we traveled to tell my in-laws that we wanted to marry. Why? Because he put a picture of us on his profile, and his mother called to ask why he didn't explain having a picture of us married. I was a bit surprised by the whole situation. I had the feeling that she was possessive of him, and she didn't want to accept anyone else. I thought, oh, maybe she's right, and he's the one for her. But then, I felt like I didn't fit in with her family. I wanted to be friends, but I knew she didn't like me. I had an aunt who said she didn't like me, but I didn't know what to do. He said, "No, guys, let's talk." We lived in different cities, and it was difficult to talk regularly. It was very far to the States, and I think he had to talk to his family. I wanted to stay out of the relationship, but I knew she didn't like me. She had a feeling of possession, and would never accept anyone with him, because she expected him to be available only for her. It was strange, because I didn't feel like I had a mother-in-law. I felt like my husband had another woman. It was very difficult, even knowing that he was treating her in front of me. I was a juncture, and I started to walk away because of that. She had this feeling of possession, you know, like she was the only one who could have him. She thought he was only available for her, and that he would stay with her. It was strange, because I didn't feel that way. I felt like my husband had another woman. It was weird, even though we were in the same city, and I was with him. I was a single person, and I started to walk away, because I wanted to take care of my life. We ended up moving to a city, because he lost his job, and we ended up returning to St. Joseph, because he got another job there. It was a city we always liked to live in. We lived back there. I resumed my studies, and he worked. He was traveling for 14 days, then home for 14 days, and sometimes 21. You've been moving away, taking care of your life, and we've been living in a city, because he lost his job there. We ended up returning to St. Joseph, because he got another job there. We always liked that city, so we lived there again. I resumed my studies, he worked, and he was traveling for 14 days, at home for 14 days, and sometimes for 21 days. During this period, he realized he was drinking less. In the second year of working on ships, he improved his drinking problem, which was a relief for me, because I was very afraid of sleeping. I thought he was going to become an alcoholic, or something would happen at home, when I was sleeping well. Every time I talked to him, I was trying to convince him not to drink. After traveling for days and spending 14 days at home, he realized that he was drinking less. This was a relief to me, because I was very afraid of sleeping. I thought he was going to become an alcoholic, or something would happen at home when I was sleeping well. Every time I tried to end the relationship, he cried and begged me to stay. I asked him to stay, and of course, he did. You stay because you are in love. It's a cycle. First serious boyfriend, first husband, first everything for you. You don't have me. I had no experience with that situation. Then I realized that my appearance was a problem for him. It passed like this: oh, criticize my clothes. I had that dressing the way. I can't take it anymore. I can't live like this. He cried, begging me to stay. I asked him to stay, and of course, he did. You stay because you're in love, and you're used to that cycle. First serious boyfriend, first husband, first everything. You don't have me. I didn't have any experience with that situation. Then I realized that my appearance was a problem for him. He would criticize my clothes, how I dressed, and so on. He wanted his hair to be the way he wanted, and it only got worse over time. I couldn't even change my hair color, even though I had the same hair for 3 years. I even got afraid of cutting it. He said, "Your hair can't be curly. Your hair can't be short. Your hair can't be such a color." So, he chose everything, and you just had to obey your husband, because at that time, I was going to church. He wanted his hair to be just the way he liked it, and it got worse over time. I stuck with the same hairstyle for 3 years, because I couldn't change the color or style. I even got scared of cutting it. He decided on everything, from the curls to the length to the color. At the time, I was going to church, so I felt like I had to obey my husband. It was really hard for me, because I thought it would be okay to obey him. He also had a question for me: would he get more money if I obeyed? He had a good job, and I didn't like working. So, every time I got a job that had something to do, it became a terror for him. He played the role of the housewife in front of me. He ended with me when I received. He was the man of the house, and I had to obey him. This was really hard for me, because I thought it would be okay if I obeyed. I thought, if I obey, he won't fight. He also had a good job, and he didn't like me to work. So, every time I got a job that I had something to do, it became a terror for him. He played the role of the housewife in front of me. He ended up with me, and when I received money from some jobs, like a photography job that I did, I had to deliver the salary for him into his account, because he said he understood better the numbers than I did. I was a woman, and he was the one who had to manage everything. Then, everything was in his name. I didn't have a Netflix account in my name. He was the one who sent it and dismantled it at that time until he lost jobs again. At that time, I was supporting the home for a while. I started a small fitness food business, which turned out to be a huge success. It helped a lot until he got a job. I helped him get another job, because I had a lot of connections as a photographer. I knew a lot of people. It turned out that my influence, which I had gained through a lot of sacrifice, helped him a lot. It helped him get a job, meet people, and be in the right cycle to have things. That's when my sister and I started a small fitness food business, which was doing really well. It was a great opportunity, and it helped me a lot. Then he got a job, and I helped him get there. I had a lot of connections because of my photography work, so I was able to help him out. It turned out that my influence helped him a lot. He got a job, met people, and was in the right cycle to have things. That's when my sister, who was around 18 when I started dating him, came to live with us. She had 7 years on me. We spent vacations together, and he said, "You get very lonely," and we lived totally isolated from our families. I started traveling more and more. In a year, I was away 70 days, so he didn't stay at home. He said he was going to get much more peaceful knowing that someone was. He was there with me, and he wanted my sister to live with us. I saw no problem. We were in a quiet financial situation, and she was living with us. He said, "You have no children." I have no children. We will not have children at the time. I was diagnosed with various health problems. The doctor said that it would be almost impossible for me to get pregnant. I would have to undergo a long treatment, so I accepted that I wouldn't be a mother. Everything was fine, and then he said, "We'll put the finishing touches on your sister's room. We'll go for everything we would give to a son." I found that beautiful, romantic, and cool. We set up a room just for her. She was part of our family, and we went to church with her. Everyone was evangelical at that time. He didn't drink, but he was going to church and involved with various church activities. My sister and I worked like this, too. I worked when he boarded, and when he came back home, I stopped working because of the abuse. I was having a hard time with work, and I was worried that it was going to cause problems. I wish I had had problems with him, but he was silent. He didn't say a word for days. He didn't understand that what I did was wrong, and that was hard for me. I was already very weak from the abuse. He treated me aggressively at home, and he started acting strangely. He was as strange as he liked. He had a look on his face that made me nervous. I said that the more I felt afraid of things, the more he seemed to like it. I became more and more afraid, including of being with him. I think that being with him was really not good for me, and that's when I think I disappeared. I lost my strength. I stopped getting out of bed almost completely. I wasn't myself. I thought he was very strange, and I told him so. "Look, I'm not okay. I'm not feeling well. I want to have a career, but it's hard. My partner depends on my income, and I'm worried about her." When he came back to work, he asked me to close the company. He said that a man in his position shouldn't have a woman who sells food. I couldn't work anymore. I was so sad. I had to stop working on the heart pain project, because I was having a hard time. I started working on this project right around the same time that I started working as a photographer. Sometimes I had two jobs, because I was trying to make ends meet. I continued working as a photographer for the company that I was working for. Unfortunately, the crises in Brazil closed the company, which made me depressed. I was dealing with domestic abuse, and I couldn't work. I got more and more debilitated. She was really struggling with depression, and it was really hard for her. I got an eye. One day at night, he was boarded. I went out to dinner with my sister, and I started having panic attacks. My face would get all red and swollen, and it looked really bad. I started getting hematomas, and I got sick in the restaurant. I went to my mother and said, "Look, I need to go to the hospital." I arrived at the hospital. When I was in the emergency room, I drove myself there, and my sister didn't drive. The doctor looked at me and said, "You're having an attack of panic." He gave me the phone number and address of a psychiatrist. I made an appointment to see the doctor, and I started taking the medicine. I started to feel better. I started to be happy again. I started to lose weight, and I went back to the gym. Then I realized that sometimes I felt well. I left that for his noise to make. I truly believe that our home was haunted. I think there was an entity hiding my shoes, my clothes, my products, and me. I just know I improved, and he seemed annoyed. It was as if the more sick I was, the happier he was, and I didn't understand that. Then, he started treating me as if I was invalid. For example, when it was time to go to the supermarket, he said, "Don't stay at home, rest. I don't want you doing nothing." I'm so grateful for the care I received. It was truly a game changer, turning my life around completely. I had always wanted a husband who would take care of me, and he did just that. He even took me to the supermarket, treating me like a queen. I mentioned to him that I was dealing with depression, and he was kind enough to let me know that his sister was in a similar situation. He even mentioned that he took her to the supermarket, a girl who was younger than us and just as affectionate as our daughter. Our family was so supportive, and I'm so thankful for the care I received. Happy things. They were improving right after some months. I was already working again. I started working again on my own when he traveled, and I realized that he started to stay bothered again. He had moments of happiness and sadness. Sadness as soon as he was strange, and I didn't understand what was happening. Then, I remember it was New Year's Eve, and I told him, "Let's go travel, let's do something." And he said, "Let's go to the beach." Then he said, "So, we'll take his sister. She was like a daughter to us, you know." I went out with them, and I don't know what happened to me that day. He said he had taken some food and drinks from our house, because we were staying in a hostel far from home. We were ready for a car, and I took some of the things he had taken. I started to feel sick, so I deleted them. When I woke up, neither she then he said, "Okay, we'll take her sister. She was like a daughter to us," and I went out with them. I don't know what happened to me that day. He said he had taken some food and drinks from our house, because we were staying in a hostel far from home. We were ready to leave, and I took some of the things he had taken. I started to feel sick, and I deleted them. When I woke up, neither my sister nor he were in the posada. They weren't there. I don't know where they were or what happened. I just know a lot of time has passed. They came back saying that they slept there and that we left. I said I slept. I didn't sleep. I just fainted. There was something out there. Normal knows. And so it was. Everything was very confusing in my head, because every time I confronted the wrong things that happened. My sister and he weren't at the posada, so they weren't there. I don't know where they were or what happened, but I know a lot of time has passed. They came back and said, "There, you slept," and we left. I said, "I slept, but I didn't sleep. I just fainted." I was absolutely sure that something out there was normal. Everything was very confusing in my head, because every time I confronted the wrong things, things happened. At home, he said I had to go back to the psychiatrist, because it was depression, and I needed to take medicine. One day, my sister went to get my sister from work. She said, "I'll be late." She leaves for 10 hours of work. I said, "All right." She came home, looked at me, and started crying. I said, "I'm going to see what's happening, right?" And he said, "It won't." In my house, he said I should go back to the psychiatrist. He said I needed to take remedy. He went to get my sister from work. He said, "I'll be late." She leaves 10 hours of work. I said, "All right." She came home, looked at me, and started crying. I said, "I'm going to see what's happening, right?" She said, "I had a bad day at work." I left. We entered the room with him. I called him for a conversation and looked at him. I had the courage that day. I told him, "You are interested in my sister. My sister is what is happening inside our house. If it is you, we have to solve this situation." He looked at me and said, "You are crazy. You see things where you don't have them. You're hallucinating. I am a man of God. I am the authority of this." She had a rough day at work, and she and I entered the room with him. I called him for a conversation, and I felt brave that day. I had the courage to tell him, "You are interested in my sister. If it's you, we have to solve this situation." He looked at me and said, "You're crazy. You see things that aren't there. You're hallucinating. I'm a man of God. I'm the authority of this home. As you dare to talk about me, who takes Holy Supper with you, that I will for the meeting of churchmen." Then he used the whole image of a man of God, of a man who went to the church, of a man of social causes, to say that I was crazy. I felt ashamed of my sister. I felt embarrassed to have spoken to my husband, a good man, who I was taking care of. I know, and then he traveled, he boarded, and he sent me. He said, "Ask your friend if they need help with shipping. I'm going to Ireland for a few months, and I'll be helping with their shipments and career while they are away. I'll be handling logistics, sending out documents, and converting currency from other countries. I'll be doing everything for them. Even when they are sick, I'll be there for them. I'm not an employee, but I'm their husband, and I'll do whatever I can." I was talking to my friend about how he's going to Ireland for his exchange program, and he asked me to help with some shipments and other logistics. While he was away, I helped with issues related to money conversion, and bank documentation for money from other countries. I did everything for him, even when he was sick. I was never officially employed, but I was his partner and helped out. He said that as soon as the business was growing, he spoke with the company he was working for. They told him they were going to open an office in Scotland, and that he needed to improve his English quickly so he could support him while he was shipping. I told him to speak with his friend and see what they were doing to go to Ireland. My husband was always very supportive. He encouraged me to live in the same city as him when he traveled, and he even offered to help me improve my English so that we could have a better conversation. I told him that I didn't have much interest in going to Ireland, but I did have a lot of friends there from my conferences. I didn't think much about Ireland, and I didn't even consider it. I was a bit surprised when he suggested it, but I told him that I didn't think it was realistic for me to go to Ireland. I'm married, and he came home and said that he had already talked to your friend and called her. I don't remember what I said, but I'm sure it was something silly. I never had any interest in going to Ireland. I thought I'd go to the United States, because there were a lot of people there. I also had conferences there, but never for Ireland. I never even thought about it. I just kind of pushed it to the back of my mind. I said, he's not serious. Imagine how it is that I'm going to Ireland. I'm married. Then he came home and spoke to your friend. You already called her. I don't know what I said. So, it's very expensive. We just have to look at what's available. I'm not gaining so well. He doesn't know, but let's look at what people have to know. At this time, I found an agency in Sao Paulo. I spoke to them. Oh, there is an agency here that does exchange for Ireland, but I don't know how. I don't understand any of this. He took it and said it tidies that the people are going to Sao Paulo now. I arrived in Sao Paulo. It's quite expensive, but if you're interested, I'd be happy to help. I'm not doing so well financially, but I'm hopeful. I found an agency in Sao Paulo that facilitates exchanges to Ireland. I spoke with them, and they said they'd be taking a group to Sao Paulo soon. When I arrived, I went straight to the agency and spoke with a woman about the cost. She informed me that the payment would be made the following day, and I was to receive the money in my account. I looked at the woman and said, "Money? He will pay. You will do the exchange when I arrive." I noticed that I was already taking pictures, like the ones they take at these agencies when you're exchanging. The woman said that they already had a team to take photos of me. She asked how many days I would be in Ireland and if I had any projects. I said, "My God, what is happening?" "No, you're going, my friend. You're going to improve your English, and then you're going to Scotland to find me." I said to my sister, "What are you going to do with her?" She said, "No, go. She'll lock the college. We're going to go to Europe, everyone." I said, "Okay, so let's go, but you have to go first because you're helping me. You have to improve your English." I said, "Okay." I went to Ireland. I took a flight, and I went with a suitcase full. I was still in treatment for depression, so he was there with me. He was going to stay for 2 weeks, and he wanted me to live at the address he chose with the people he chose. When I arrived in Ireland, he told me that I couldn't work, and that he was going to keep me. He said he didn't want me to work. He said my priority was to learn English to help with his company, because he would need help. Everything was going really well, but I was starting to feel a bit overwhelmed. I met some wonderful people and started to feel more confident. I got a job and started to feel more independent. Then, unfortunately, I encountered some challenges. I was struggling to cope, especially because I was already receiving psychiatric treatment. I was doing well at school, and I got a job. He was earning my money, and then he called and said, "You're a very ugly woman. You're fat. You're stupid. You're poor." I was living in Ireland during the 4th month. He went there and started shopping for me. I said, "Hours, but why were you buying so much new? You have so much already." He said, "Because you are not here. You are not in Ireland, so it's time for me to do something for myself. I've done too much for you." I said, "All right. Go ahead and buy yourself whatever you need to feel your best. I totally get it." Then, I realized that he was already like this, and he was angry because I wanted to be more, even though I was doing really well for myself. Then, he left and called me on a beautiful day. He said that I was going to PR, and that a man of his level didn't deserve a woman like me. He always spoke to me that way, and he always referred to me as an unattractive, unintelligent woman who would never amount to anything. I was really hoping we could talk. One day, I called him to tell him I was going to work, and he said, "So you're saying I'm incompetent and worthless? You're so incompetent that you didn't even fill my bag when I called you to fill it." Because you don't have the ability to have anything, you will never be anything without me. That really got to me. I remember that in the house I lived in, I had a closet where I would lock myself in to avoid anyone seeing me. There, I cried for hours and I said, "Look, When I came back to Brazil, I left everything here because you are my husband. You said you would come here, but you didn't. Now you want a divorce. We are people from the church. We have a commitment, and it's not fair to simply pick up the phone and ask for a divorce after almost 15 years together. It's not like that, is it?" But he said that if you come to be worse off, you don't come. Then I called PR. My sister said that it's happening at home, and I'm worried about what's not right here. I'm hoping you'll change, but I'm waiting for you to do so. He came to talk to me, and he said, "You only live in Ireland because of his money. If I go to Ireland, I'll have a hard time, because you're a lazy person. You don't do anything, everything you have is because of him." I believed him, but I'm trying not to. I thought that I would never be able to be myself without him. I thought that I would never be able to get away from him. After years of believing the lie of another, you feel like you're nothing. You don't have the strength to get out of there. I already lived in another country and paid my bills. I was totally financially independent of him, but in my head, I was nothing because I was ugly, stupid, and incapable. That was how he referred to me. I have something to share with you that's related to what I mentioned earlier. It's about the narcissist L. He's not going to kill you, and there's a reason for that. He doesn't want to be seen as a killer, but he will do it. He'll take your life. I didn't want to live anymore. I didn't want to live, but then I remembered how other women welcomed me. I have a friend who went to Ireland and was a witness. She saw him, met him, and heard his phone calls. I remember her being in my house one day, and I cried a lot. I said, "I'll starve to death. How will I survive in another country? What will I do?" And she grabbed my shoulders, shook me, and said, "Sinara, you are already doing this. You don't need him. You support yourself. You just pay your school renewal alone." They were two. I was so happy to have gathered €0,000 in just 2 weeks. It was such an incredible journey of self-discovery. I realized that I wasn't the person he had thought me to be. I wasn't a sad, depressed, unfortunate, or sick woman. I was strong and resilient. I think he was intimidated by my strength. He seemed to envy my courage to do things he didn't have to do. At that time, I didn't understand why he wanted a divorce, even though he spoke to me about it. I didn't understand because, even though he put me down, I thought I was ugly. But, if I'm really the ugliest person in the world, and if I'm the kind of human being he's talking about, then I'm really confused. Then I got money and started investing in therapy I didn't even know about. I started doing therapy 4 times a week. Later, it was 3 times a week. Then he called me one day and said, "I want." At the time, I said I didn't want to get a divorce, but that day he called me and said, "Who is divorced now?" "I am." "I think I already gave in. I think you already humiliated me too much, and I won't let you humiliate me more. It's over." Then he changed his mind, tried, and turned to speak to me like this. "If you try to live your own life, I only ask you one thing. Write a letter to your family. I'm doing my best, but I'm struggling to understand your perspective. I'm not sure if I can believe you." I told him that I want you to be happy, and I'm willing to let go of our history. At the time, I didn't realize how important it was for me to be strong for you. I'm living in another country now, and I'm trying to understand the importance of this situation. I don't understand why he spoke the way he did. I'm not sure what's going on with you and your divorce. I'd like to get some things off my chest. I'm in another country, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on with us. I feel like our marriage and relationship have been great because of you. You make me do things that make it impossible for us to stay together. You've destroyed our relationship, and I've tried to talk about what's happening, but I've hit a wall. I just found out that you've been having a relationship with someone else. I was torn between wanting to get a divorce and wanting to reconnect. I felt like I didn't understand myself. I was in another country, and I felt like I was already starting to live my life without him. I realized that a lot of the problems in our marriage and our relationship were because of me. I made him do things that made it impossible for us to stay together. I found out that he was having a profile on a prostitution website. I was confused and upset. I told him that I didn't understand what was happening. He said that he was trying to assimilate and take care of me. He called me and asked for forgiveness. He said that he was confused and that the fact that I went to Ireland upset him. He said that he couldn't live without me and that if I didn't come back to him, he would kill himself. He said this to me, and then he sent some money asking me to go to Brazil for a honeymoon. There are some strange things that happen in prostitution. I spoke to God from heaven, asking that this not happen. I was trying to assimilate, trying to take care of myself, when he called me and asked for forgiveness. He said he was confused by the fact that I went to Ireland, and that he couldn't live without me. He said that if I didn't come back to him, he would kill himself. He then sent me some money to Brazil for a honeymoon to reconnect, and to help me feel better about myself. When you have low self-esteem and are still in a healing process, you might feel tempted to go back. I took the first flight to Brazil. When I arrived home, I arrived at the airport, and he was already in tears, crying vows of love. When I arrived at home, my sister still lived with him. He was in the process of moving right to her house. He turned to me and spoke, saying, "I asked you to come back here, because I just wanted to look in your face and say, divorce me." I was really struggling to reconnect with my sister when she moved to a new apartment. I was still in the process of healing from my self-esteem issues, and I was really worried about her. When I arrived at the airport, I saw her and started crying. I told her I loved her, and she was moving into her new place. I asked her to come back, because I wanted to look in her face and tell her I wanted a divorce. I said I didn't want her anymore, because she made me feel disgusted. I thought she was a horrible woman, and I wanted to show her that she couldn't live without me. When he said that to me, I couldn't even describe what I felt. I called my psychologist at the time, and she said, "Sinara, you have to understand that a person like him will say that you are fat, you will lose weight, and then it will go." I said, "I'm so sad. I want a divorce. I don't want you anymore because you make me feel disgusted. You are a horrible woman, and I just wanted to prove that you are nothing without me." When he said that to me, I couldn't even describe what I felt. I called my psychologist at the time, and she spoke. "So, Sinara, you have to understand that a person like him will say that you are fat, you will lose weight, and then it goes to the other day. He will say that it is your hair, that it's not good, you will change, and then you will change, because the problem is not in you, the problem is in it." At that time, and I was already kind of sick, you know. I couldn't take it anymore. Then my sister moved home, and people helped her move to her own apartment. My mother came, and I cried a lot. I was devastated, and then I went to my sister. The other day, he said, "Your hair is not looking good there." I changed, and then he said, "It's not you, it's your hair." At that time, I was already kind of sick. You know, I couldn't take it anymore. Then, my sister moved to a new apartment, and my mother came. I cried a lot, because I was devastated. Then, I went to my sister's house, and we ended up sleeping there with my mother. The other day, he said, "My parents are coming for our house, and you can't come with us." He put all my clothes, everything I had built, and everything I had in the apartment in a garbage bag. He put everything in a bag of garbage so I would feel it, but before that, there was this part, too. Before I went to sleep at my house, my sister and I were in our apartment. He spoke as soon as my sister walked in. My parents came to visit our house, and my sister was there. She was upset, because she felt like she didn't have a place to call home anymore. She was looking for her things, and they weren't there. She was really sad, and she came to me and started to scream. I ran out of the room and called, "Let's talk. I'm ready." I went into our room, which was a suite. I was going to bathe when I left, and I was going to have a bath. He was standing in the room where my sister was. He was looking for her things, but they weren't there. He was very sad, because she wasn't there in the house anymore. Then, he came to me and started screaming. I ran out of the room and called my psychologist. I called a friend of mine, and they said it tidies up and leaves the house. Then, I had some things like that. He called me Sinara. When he changed his personality, he answered when he saw that I didn't. He said, "My love, talk to you," so he could change. And that was very confusing for me, because I didn't know what to do in a Kel position. I spoke, "He will." I called my psychologist, a friend of mine, and they said it tidies up and leaves the house. Then, I had some things like that. He called me Sinara. When he changed his personality, he saw that I didn't respond. He answered, my love, to talking to you so he could change, and that was very confusing for me, because I didn't know what to do. I spoke, and he would hit me or kill me. What would happen? I would die inside, because he started to be violent and aggressive, screaming, right? He stopped the car with me on a deserted street, and shouted with the glasses closed, speaking the worst barbarities. I don't have the courage to pronounce them aloud. Then, I took my bag and put on my outfit. I was in the apartment with everything, and I managed to run out with the car key on the edge of the driveway. He was so angry that he was about to kill me. He grabbed the car keys and shouted at me. He was so violent and aggressive. He screamed at me, and I was so scared. He stopped the car in a deserted street, and he shouted with the glasses closed. He said some really horrible things, but I don't have the courage to say them out loud. Then, he took the car keys from my apartment. I was so scared, and I ran out of the apartment. I grabbed the keys, and I ran to the car. He came after me, but luckily, he didn't catch up to me. I don't know what he would have done if he had caught up to me that night. My neighbor left her apartment with her husband to take her dog out. I almost ran out of breath when I got to my apartment. He was shouting at me, and he made me leave. I said that I wasn't going out. He started screaming at me. I was sitting at the table, and he came in. He was mad at me, and he was yelling. He said, "I'm leaving, and I'm taking the car key with me." But then he started to help me. He tried to talk to me, and he tried to welcome me. I got in the car and went to my sister's house. I slept right through the night. I was crying all day and all night. I spent 10 days crying. In the end, I had to go to a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist didn't want me to go back to Ireland, and I didn't want to go back to Ireland. I didn't want to use my ticket, because the doctor said I had to stay in Brazil. I was really grateful for the offer of help, but I decided to go on my own. I got in the car and went to my sister's house, where I slept right through the night. I spent 10 days crying, and eventually, I had to see a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist didn't want to release me to return to Ireland, and I didn't want to return my ticket, because the doctor said I had to stay in Brazil for my family's care. He took my money, which I didn't have access to, but I didn't have anything else. I had €400 in a bank account in Ireland, but that was it. Then, we tried to get a divorce, but he wouldn't accept any conditions. We exchanged lawyers a couple of times, but I didn't want to keep fighting. I already wanted to separate, and on the day of the divorce, I went to. My family took care of me, and he kindly provided me with a ride to the airport. I had nothing with me, and he had taken everything. My clothes were in a garbage bag. I got some things, but I don't know what happened to the rest. Some were sent to my mother's house, and I had to donate the rest, because I had nowhere to put them. I had no house, no car, no money, and no husband, but I had the strength and willingness to gather my things. Ireland. I left with nothing but the clothes on my back, hitchhiking to the airport. Everything else was gone. I had no idea what would happen to it. Some things ended up in the trash, while others found new homes with my mother or were donated to charity, because I didn't have a place to put them. I had no house, no car, no money, and no husband. But I had a lot of sadness. Then, I remembered that I arrived in New York to do C. Onexo was an 8-hour connection, so I took a bus. I went to walk through New York, thinking it was a lie. I entered the country, thinking it would not call me to return home. I would call home. The most crazy thing in the world was happening in New York. I was entering the plane, and a girl was in front of me, crying a lot. I remember arriving in New York to do C. It was an 8-hour connection, so I took a bus. I went for a walk through New York, thinking I was lying to myself. I entered the country, thinking I wouldn't be called back home. I thought it would be Elle who would call me back home. The most crazy thing in the world happened in New York. I was getting on a plane, and there was a girl in front of me who was crying a lot. She looked at me and said, "So you're Brazilian?" I said, "I'm her friend. Please give me one hug." I hugged that girl and told her she was going to be all right. She said she was going to do the exchange in Ireland. That was the first time she was going to stay away from her family. Coincidentally, that girl was a lawyer who talked to me a lot. We are friends to this day. I went to understand other things about abusive relationships. I didn't. She looked at me and said, "So you're from Brazil?" I replied, "Yes, I am." She said, "Please give me one hug." I hugged her and told her that she was going to be all right. She said that I was going to do the exchange in Ireland. And that was the first time she was going to stay away from her family. Coincidentally, that girl was a lawyer and talked to me a lot. We are friends to this day. I went to understand other things about abusive relationships. I didn't stop doing me therapy. Caring. I started to catch firm right in the care with myself, right, because it took years for me to heal. Then he called me one day, crying, wanting to come back. Then he no longer wanted to give me the divorce. He didn't want to do anything anymore. And then if I called him, he answered, but then he cried, trying to turn to that means of new. But then I was already with my life, and I no longer wanted to go back to the divorce. I really wanted to get back together with my husband, but he didn't want to get divorced. He said, "Let's stay married. You live in Ireland, and I live in Brazil. We'll see." I said, "No, I won't stay in this situation. You did what you made, there is no way to go back. I want a separation." He didn't want to sign the divorce papers on the day of the divorce. He was upset and went to the lawyer's office and gave the lawyer a scandal. I called the lawyer and said, He said, Let's stay married. You live in Ireland, and I live in Brazil. We'll see. I said, no, I won't stay in this situation. You did what you had to do. There's no going back. I want a separation. He didn't want to sign the divorce papers on the day of the signing. He was upset and went to the lawyer's office and told him the whole story. I called the lawyer, saying that I no longer knew what to do and that I was entitled to some things. He refused, saying, I'm okay in another country. What can I do for you? I said, you want to stay with the dog. He started to make a point of things. I said, all right. I just wanted to get rid of that situation, because I already understood that he was the person I came back to. I was going to die. I was absolutely sure that it was only a matter of time. I was at a loss as to what to do, or what I was entitled to. He refused to speak to me, but he did speak to the dog. He said, I'm okay. What can I do for you? Do you want to stay with the dog? He started to make a point of everything I said. All right. I just wanted to get rid of that situation, because I already understood that he was the person I loved. I was going to die. I was absolutely sure that the reason for the divorce was my head. This was no longer true. I thought we had been together for 15 years. I was not beautiful for the guy. I was not an attractive woman, and I was as soon as I suddenly found that my stereotype was not the stereotype of a woman he wanted. Then I accepted. I cried a lot. At the time, he expelled me from the house, and I went to the woman's. I'm so proud of my daughter. She played such an important role in helping me move forward and not look back. She really saved my life. I'm so proud to say that I needed my daughter to come into my life the right way. That's when I started studying violence in the home. I started studying the laws in Ireland to help women in Brazil who were victims of domestic violence and went through the same situation as I did. At the time, my ex-husband kicked me out of our house. I went to the police station to ask Maria da Penha for help, but they wouldn't help me. They said my apartment was in his name, and he didn't want me there anymore. They couldn't do anything except call the police to get my things. It came out later in the pandemic. It took a while to get things back, but eventually, he called me. I said, look, I went to the police station to see if they could help me, but they wouldn't. They said that because the apartment was in his name, he didn't want me there anymore. They couldn't do anything, so they had to call the police to get my things. It came out later in the pandemic. I was there one day when he called me. I said, I'm pregnant. I want a divorce. I don't want anything to do with you. He started talking to people who said I had betrayed him. He started to defame me, and then he threatened me. He spoke as soon as I left for Brazil with my daughter. She had a bag for me. I looked at both sides of the street before crossing. I never forgot it, and because of it, I was very afraid of Brazil with my daughter. He called, and then I was pregnant and wanted a divorce. I didn't want to be with him anymore. I started talking to people who said I had betrayed him, and he started to say bad things about me. He even threatened me. I was in Brazil with my daughter when he called. He told me to go back to the US with her. I never forgot it, and I was very afraid of Brazil with my daughter. He called me, and then I was going to the hospital because he spoke to me. He said that I was a bad mother, that I couldn't be a mother, and that I didn't have the ability to be a mother. He wanted me to take my daughter from him no matter what it took. I told him that if I did that, I would have an abortion and die here. He already stopped thinking about it. He said, if you die, I'll take your body. You can leave money in the bank account that your sister has access to. I'll go there, take your body, and bring pro Brazil and your family. I'll worry about them. I felt like he didn't see me as a person when he spoke to me. He referred to me as if I were nothing. He spoke to me like that when he called me to make a letter. He said that if I died, I should write everything I had to on the letter. I had very clear intentions, and I'm sure of that. At that time, I was with the father of my daughter. My daughter's daughter and father entered the situation, and they sent a message for him. He stopped when the father of my daughter intervened. He signed the divorce, and it was the happiest moment of my life. I even tried to maintain the good neighborhood policy because, for some reason I don't know, he gave her the situation is really tough. He lost a lot of money, and he still owes me. I think he owes me over $10,000, but he says he doesn't owe me that much. He says he owes me less than $7,000, but he still hasn't paid me back. The lawyer said that if I had told him, he would have put a clause in the agreement for him to pay me back. Now, it's up to you to prove that he said he would pay me back. I spoke to him about it. Then, he kindly left to go there to deliver one of the things he had to share with me. He brought it to me 3 years after the divorce, because I had a legal order in place. I asked the police to come to my home to return me my things, but he didn't want to return any of it. Over time, we went our separate ways. My daughter was born after the divorce, and a few months later, I became a mother. We were still in touch with my daughter's father, even though we weren't together anymore. I was living in my house, and he was living in his. When I got pregnant, my middle sister moved to Ireland, because she was really shocked by the things he was doing. She didn't want me to go through my pregnancy alone, so she came to support me, and that really helped. She said that when she went to prepare to go, she was thinking about me. Ireland. He reached out to her and invited her to have lunch, saying he wanted to say goodbye before she left. My sister was taken aback by the invitation. She wanted to hear him out, but he continued to speak ill of me, calling me a terrible housewife and fat. My sister said, "You were married to her for 14 years, and only at the end did you decide to talk about the body that she wasn't the best cook, and that always made me worry." My sister always spoke like this. Nora has something more in this story that I'll share now. I'm so grateful that I was able to speak with my mother. I've been focusing on my daughter. Then the pandemic hit, and my younger sister came to visit. She still lives in San Jose, which is really far away. It was so strange. I called her, but she didn't answer. I sent her videos of my daughter, but she didn't see them. I looked for her, and then she went over to her ex's house. I said, "Why is he in your house?" "She's my friend. I have one debt to him. You know, he's like a father to me. I will always talk to him, Sinara, no matter what he did to you." That made me very suspicious. I called my mom, who is happening. My mother, my daughter. I know she's working hard. I want to go visit her, because she's working hard right now. During the pandemic, many Brazilians struggled financially, and my middle sister always spoke like this. In this story, something is happening, and I said to my sister, "You are crazy about love of God. She is my daughter, and you are being bad to her and to me." I protected her there on a beautiful day. I called my father and said, "So, Dad, I think that or they had a case, and that caused my divorce, or they are together. I played this green. I hit this ball, and then my dear father ended up calling for my sister. He put a lot of pressure on her, and she couldn't handle it. The other day, she called an aunt and said, "Wow. She's been having an affair with the ex-husband of Sinara the whole time." And then my aunt said, "You'll have to choose between your family and him." She said, "I choose him." That was it. They lived together in true love. Everything he did was with her. She was with him when he was in a bad place, and she helped him out of that situation. I'm so grateful that I was able to turn things around. I'm not going to get into the details, because it's a bit complicated, and they're still living together. It was a joint decision from the start, and she has a lot to share about it. She was the one who encouraged the affair while I was sick in bed, trying to recover. My psychologist at the time noticed something there. The lawyer was able to understand the situation, and my psychologist was available to talk as soon as I felt ready. He explained that his reluctance to give me a divorce was due to the fact that he didn't want to abandon me. He had initially agreed to the divorce when I was pregnant with my daughter, who was already in the advanced stages of development. He was kind enough to provide her with half of her father's support, and he didn't leave my daughter without ensuring her safety. I was worried about leaving the country with my daughter because of the laws in Ireland. If your divorce is less than 10 months old and you have a relationship with someone who is pregnant, even if it's in another country, or if you take a DNA test or give 50% of the child's support to the parent, it could complicate things. My daughter's father said that he would never take a DNA test because he didn't think he needed to. I knew we were together because my ex-husband lived in another country, right? I gave half of the guard to my daughter, and when people ended, he said, never let you go to Brazil to see your family. So, it was a plan that my ex-husband also had. He knew that I had told him, if you don't sign me, I will be stuck in the country with my daughter. And then he signed. I signed, and then I got involved with cutting, with laws, learning, working in the area of family law, working with women who are victims of domestic violence in Ireland. I'm so happy to share that I've been granted the opportunity to travel to Brazil and bring my daughter with me. It's been a journey, but I've been blessed with full custody of my little girl. Unfortunately, her father has been dealing with health issues, which has affected his ability to be in her life. Currently, he's being cared for by my sister, who has been an incredible support. While he wasn't able to be in her life much, he was a wonderful father. I'm grateful for the time we had together. I had to rebuild my life alone, without my husband or father, while my daughter lived in another city. I lived in Dublin during the pandemic, and I had to raise my 10-month-old daughter alone. So, my sister, who lives with my ex-husband, was born on the same day as me. She is very morbid, if I can use that word, because she stayed with my sister, who lives in Europe. I would have understood, but we are different. I had to rebuild my life alone after my husband and father of my daughter died. He lived in another city, and I lived in Dublin during the pandemic. I had to raise my 10-month-old daughter alone. So, it is that my sister, who lives with my ex-husband, was born on the same day as me. She is very morbid, if I can use that word. She had stayed with my sister, who lives in Europe. I would have understood if we were different, but he got my clone, a person who was born on the same day as me, who talks just like me, has the same voice, the same laugh. This is all very morbid. Then, when everything came to light, I called her, and she didn't answer. I attended there, I called him, he answered, and I told him what was happening. He said, I didn't want to have the gestation. You didn't want to proceed with your pregnancy. Then, now I'm going to. He found my doppelganger, someone who was born on the same day as me and has the same voice and laugh. It's all very strange, and then when everything came out, I called her, but she didn't answer. I went to her, and she answered. I told him what was happening, and he said, I didn't want to have the pregnancy, you didn't want to proceed with your pregnancy, and now I'm going to be with your sister. He said it was a punishment for me. Even when I went to Brazil, he spoke of the honeymoon and everything. He said that as soon as he left, I only wanted to go to Brazil to prove that I was nothing, that everything that I am was because of this. This is also a question of punishment for me, to learn my lesson for becoming a mother, which is very complicated for me, because of so many things. I'm so grateful that you're here with your sister. I'm so thankful that everything turned out well. Even when I went to Brazil, even though he spoke of the honeymoon and everything, he said that as soon as I wanted to go to Brazil to prove that I was nothing, that everything that I am was because of this. I'm so grateful that I had the opportunity to learn from this experience. Becoming a mother is very complicated for me, because so much. I went to Brazil in 2018, and then after my daughter was born, I didn't return from there. Last year, my father was diagnosed with cancer. My mother was in Ireland with me, and we all went to Brazil to visit my father. It was the first time that I got right in court to take my daughter to Brazil, and it was so very important to me, but I was very afraid. I went to Brazil in 2018, and then after my daughter was born, I didn't return. Last year, my father was diagnosed with cancer. When my father found out, my mother was in Ireland with me, and we all went to Brazil to visit him. It was the first time I had gone to court to take my daughter to Brazil, and it was very important to me. But I was very afraid that he would appear, and I was afraid he would do something to my daughter. I called all the time, because my daughter was in Brazil with my mother. My father said that his biggest dream was to spend time with my daughter. They didn't know right away, and then my father left my daughter in Brazil with my mother. I came back to Ireland to work. Thank God, everything went well. After that, my sister went and met my daughter here. I was really scared that he might come back. I was always on the phone with my daughter, because she was living with my mother in Brazil. My father really wanted to spend time with her, but he didn't know how to make that happen. Then, he left my daughter in Brazil with my mother and came back to Ireland to work. Thankfully, everything turned out well. At that time, my sister met my daughter here and started dating my husband, who still lives with her. She tried to reconnect with him and get back together with him, but I couldn't ever want to have no contact with her, because of how serious my father's cancer was. I went back to Brazil this year with my daughter, and then I didn't want her to stay alone and not have access to him. So, I spent 3 months in Brazil with my family and my daughter. I had an affair with my husband, who still lives with him today. I tried to get around, but I couldn't. I tried reconnecting with her, but I couldn't. I never wanted to have any contact with her, because of the severity of my father's cancer. I returned to Brazil this year with my daughter, and then I decided that I didn't want my daughter to stay alone and not have access to him. So, I spent 3 months in Brazil with my family and my daughter. My daughter went and came back with me. I've been separated from my daughter's father for many years. We didn't actually marry, even though we were boyfriend and girlfriend. We ended the dating relationship, and I met someone in 2020. I met someone in 2022, and we got married last year. Today, the fact that I came here to give this interview is the fact. When I was going through a really tough time, my daughter was there for me. She stuck by my side the whole time, and I'm so grateful for her support. I'm here today to share my journey and to let you know that you're not alone. I want to show you that it's possible to get out of a situation where you've been betrayed in the worst way possible. I'm so grateful for his support, and I'm so proud of how far I've come. This interview is for me, to share my journey and the lessons I've learned. I've learned that a person can only do so much to you when you don't know who you are, when you don't take care of yourself, and when you're not financially independent. I'm here to share my story, to let you know that you're not alone, and to let you know that you can get through a difficult situation. I've been through a lot, and I'm so grateful to have gotten through it. I've learned so much, and I'm here to help others. I've learned that a partner can really hurt you when you're not sure who you are, when you're not taking care of yourself, and when you're not financially independent. When you're not pursuing your career. When you're going through a situation like I did, you can get up and leave, because it's really hard. It took me 15 years of therapy to get to where I am today. I was ashamed, humiliated, and inferiorized. But I'm here now, and I'm so thankful. I can look at myself and say, I'm not that woman anymore. I'm not there anymore. Yesterday, I was talking to my husband, and I told him, no, this interview is it. I'm so glad you're in a place where you can talk about this. It's been a year since I got back together with my husband, and I'm so happy we're all on solid ground now. I'm so thankful I didn't stay with those people, because it would have been really hard to go through all that again. I think anyone who's been in an abusive relationship knows that the first thing the abuser will do is isolate you. You lose friends, and you stay away from people. It's been a year since I got back together with my ex, and I'm so happy to be where I am today. I'm grateful that I'm not with these people anymore, and I'm thankful not to have gone through this. When you're in an abusive relationship, the first thing the abuser does is isolate you from your friends and family. You feel like you're losing them, and you start to distance yourself from them. When I think about my sister's situation now, I see that my ex has a lot of power over her. She doesn't have any family left, and my mom still talks to her. It's really hard for my parents, and they're suffering. If something happened, there wouldn't be anyone to support them. He'll always have his family, and he's been working with women and domestic violence for years. The standard is the same. My ex, your family, is just as I was back then. I'm so grateful for that. When I see the situation, my sister finds me. I see that he has a lot of power, because she doesn't have any family. My mother still talks to her, and it's a horrible position for my parents. They suffer very much, and if something happens, there will be no one. He will always have his family, and all these years of working with women and domestic violence. The standard is the same. My ex-husband just did this to me because he had his mother next door. He had her in everything. And every time I go to CUT for translation or for support, all the narcissists and men who committed this same type of crime go with mothers, all without exception. Then they observe these people, and I'm not afraid to leave, because life will surprise you much more than what you passed on. I will never be that Sanara that was back there. Today, I am a different woman, but I am so grateful to be living this life today. I'm happy and at peace. I live in a forest and work with animals, something I never imagined possible. I'm thankful that life has brought me to where I am today. I'm very grateful for this journey, and I'm so thankful that I have so much to be thankful for. I'm alive. I know my interview was long, and people want to know what happened to me and how I've changed. I'll talk about that after. Today, I'm living a life full of joy and gratitude. I'm so thankful that God brought me to this beautiful forest where I get to work with animals. I never thought I'd be living this life, and I'm truly blessed. I've been through a lot, but I'm so grateful for the lessons I've learned. I've been through a divorce and 5 years of treatment to improve my health and well-being. I've also experienced a lot of other things in my life during my 7 years in Ireland. Eventually, I decided to move to Finland, where I'm now living in a cozy forest. It's snowing a lot, and I've even found love again. My husband, Maiko, and I are happily living together. I'm so happy to share my story with you. After living in Ireland for almost 7 years, I decided to move to Finland. I'm now living in a beautiful forest, where it snows quite a bit. I'm also happily married to a wonderful man, and we're starting a new chapter together. My husband, Maiko, has 4 children, and we have a big, happy family. Someone here liked this story, so I'd love it if you subscribed to the channel. There are so many new stories to explore, and don't forget to turn on notifications. If you're going through a divorce or in a relationship that's not working out, I'd like to invite you to join our supportive community. I created an exclusive group for women to help them navigate the divorce process without a lot of pain or trauma. I'll be sharing more details about our community in the description below.